Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and formations of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we shall be discussing a very dark moment in the history of the Imperium. A brief biscuit of lore, but one I hope demonstrates a plethora of things about not only how the Imperium works, but also how it can be played by the dark powers of chaos. For today, we shall be discussing the Abyssal Crusade, a terrible era in a history of errors, a catalogue. And with but one traitor in a position of power, some 30,000 Marines were condemned to hell. But worse than this, they were condemned to evil, as we shall see. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote: The Abyssal Crusade. After the ecclesial purges of year 321, millennium 37, Saint Basileus the Elder was ascendant within the imperial cult. His Puritas divisions of the faithful included several chapters of Space Marines, each of which was extremely fierce in their vigilance. Wherever a mutant or chaos cultist was found, an execution would immediately follow, regardless of age, sex, station, or circumstance. For once, the ecclesiarchy worked in concert with the Inquisition and the Adeptus Astartes across the entire segmentum solar, making it mandatory for the populace to inform on anyone they suspected to bear the spore of chaos. Those few civil liberties the imperial citizen had left were degraded further, and countless false allegations were made, but the tactic was ultimately effective. The incidents of insurrection against the Emperor dropped to almost nothing. Tides of change. This short period of peace did not last, as over a dozen star systems were soon engulfed by warp-storm Dionysus, its echoes rippling along the spiral arms of the galaxy as it raged through the Empyrean. Records of mutation and chaos cultist activity quadrupled overnight. Worse yet, it was not only the citizens who were affected by the sudden influx of chaos. Many of the Space Marine chapters with homeworlds affected by the warp storm found that the secret imperfections in their gene seed were at large upon their new recruits, giving rise to a wave of disrupting manifestations, both physical and psychological. When the ecclesiarchy heard of this sinister turn of events, St. Basileus demanded that all those chapters of the Adeptus Astartes whose home worlds were touched by the warp storm be rendered unto his judgment. Such was the Elder's influence with the High Lords of Terra that within a standard year this had come to pass. After a series of stringent tests and prognostications, hundreds of chapters were deemed unaffected by the warp storm. No less than 30 were found wanting. The Judged, as these fallen chapters came to be known, volunteered to undertake a redemptive imperial crusade. The most militant of their number demanded the right to purify their tainted flesh in the fires of battle, to make a noble end from tragic misfortune. To the surprise of his closest advisors, St. Basileus agreed to their proposal. He saw it as fitting to send the accursed into the Eye of Terra, taking the fight for the Imperium's future to the demon worlds inhabited by the Chaos Space Marines. A representative from each of the doomed chapters held an emergency council of dismay to discuss the proposed crusade. After scant solar hours of debate, they acquiesced to Basileus's demands, for they believed that martyrdom was preferable to an existence of suspicion and doubt. The last few days of year 321 of millennium 37 saw a solemn procession of strike cruisers and battle barges pass through the Cadian Gate into the Eye of Terra. Relay stations dormant and heraldic colours obscured by black mag plates. One by one, the chapters of the Judged disappeared into the iridescent dust nebula that surrounded the eye, flickering out of reach from Cadia's astropaths within a single night. Ill-fated Odyssey. Less than a solar hour after the Judged had made transition into the Eye of Terra, a war fleet of misshapen battlecraft encrusted with the sigils of chaos emerged from the dust clouds to intercept them. Torpedoes whipped open hulls and blew out docking bays, and lance fire crackled through the ether to stab through the leviathans of the Imperial fleet. Soon the battle raged so fiercely that all cohesion amongst the Judged's fleet was lost. The sheer amount of destruction meted out caused a great turmoil in the warp, and the fabric of space-time itself began to tear open. Just as the Chaos Warfleet retreated, the ships of the Judged were scattered to the furthest corners of the Eye. The journeys of the Judged could fill the great Elucidian library twice over, each tale with a sorry ending, for one does not venture into the Eye of Terra without courting grievous misfortune. Bitter redemption. The adepts of the Administratum outright deny any link between the loss of the Judged and the increased frequency of Chaos Space Marine raids out of the Eye of Terra thereafter. All that is known, almost 800 standard years after the Abyssal Crusade began, the remnants of some of the Judged chapters returned from the warp in year 112, millennium 38, having purged more than 100 worlds within the Eye of Terra. They could barely contain their fury when they were detained by agents of the Inquisition and tested for the taint of chaos. As they passed every test, a horrible truth came to light. Saint Basileus still lived, and the testimony of Convacalayan, chapter master of the Vorpal Swords chapter, revealed him as a false idol, guilty of sending innocents into the jaws of damnation in the service of the Dark Gods. The Vorpal Swords led the other survivors, blazing with righteous anger, to penetrate the defences of Basilius's palace. They found the unaccountably ancient saint, and finally revealed Basileus's true nature as an apostle of chaos. In less than a standard year, every known sepulchre and shrine dedicated to the false saint was destroyed. After his execution by the Inquisition, an edict of obliteration was carried out. The heretic saint's bones, along with countless relics, books of doctrine, and thousands of living worshippers, were placed on a derelict bulk freighter and launched directly into a nearby star, purging all taint of Basileus as if he had never existed. Even so, the full extent of his corruption and the reach of his influence has never been fully discovered in the millennia since. Notable excommunicated chapters. The following once loyalist chapters of the Adeptus Astartes are known to have been corrupted, in whole or in part, during their time in the Eye of Terra as part of the Abyssal Crusade, and to have become Heretic Astartes renegade chapters, declared excommunicate traitores by the High Lords of Terra. The Altar Brethren, the Argent Hammers, the Blades Eternal, the Bronze Gorgons, the Brothers of the Anvil, the Clerics of Steel, the Crusaders of Dawn, the Doom Legion, the Graven Fists, the Illustrians, the Invictors, the Iron Drakes, the Justicars, the Knights of Excelsior, the Lancers of Terras, the Lectors of Ixes, the Lion Guard, the Sanctors of Terra, the Sentinels, the Serpents of Light, the Sigillites, the Spears of Olympus, the Star Griffons, the Tempest Legion, the Vengeance Chapter, and the Viridian Councils. End quote. You see, as I stated, the one man, the one person in authority, being a traitor, consigned some 30 chapters to being sent into the Eye of Terra. Of course, they would turn. Eventually, near all of them. For one must be wary of fighting monsters, lest one becomes one yourself, and the Abyssal Crusade was created to do just that, to give nearly 30 chapters of Marines to the forces of chaos. Oh, many would be lost in their rampage against evil, but then the warbands that were created from these heroes of the Imperium recruited as all Chaos Space Marines forces do. Hence the one man, Basilius, hurt the Imperium badly and handed more forces to their opposition, to the evil of chaos. And it is this reason, this demonstration, that makes the Inquisition so important. Despite how blood-soaked and horrific they may be in the uncovering of chaos, the results of their inaction are clear and catastrophic. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the Abyssal Crusade. If so, then do hit like and subscribe. If you do, then please hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you are intent on gaining any figures, then do please consider getting a discount and using one of our affiliate links in the description, as that helps us out of the guides, so a good deed while filling a need, so to put it. We have a Patreon link too, if you wish to support the channel to create content, but a view and a share is more than enough really. Thank you for listening. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.